Hi everyone, I'm Martin Bamford, a chartered financial planner at Informed Choice. A bit of a different video this one because I'm going to be talking about my COVID-19 diagnosis. I was diagnosed with coronavirus on Sunday after taking a test last Friday, and in this video I want to just share a few thoughts about the diagnosis, about my own experience, thankfully very mild, with coronavirus, and also just a few studies which have come across my desk this morning which I thought were worth sharing and commentating, talking about. So that's what's coming up in this video. I'm going to keep this relatively short and hopefully quite simple because I'm still quite short of breath, still really struggling with things like focus and tiredness. But to give you a bit of background before I get into this, so I think it's fair to say, one of those people who is fairly terrified of coronavirus. I was very cautious when the news first came out back in the spring, so February, March time, and when the lockdown started. Very cautious about going to places like supermarkets. And even since the lockdown measures eased, I certainly haven't been going out and about anywhere really. Been going back to the shops a little bit more, but that's about it. Reason for that caution is because I had asthma as a child, so I've had breathing difficulties my whole life. I'm slightly overweight at the moment, which again is a risk factor when it comes to COVID. And generally, from experiences I've heard of people I know who have had coronavirus, it does not sound like a pleasant experience for anyone that I know that's been through it. So for those reasons, very cautious. I've probably been a little bit less cautious since the summer, I think it's fair to say. Still cautious, but slightly less than I was before. And then, weirdly, in about a week before my diagnosis, I became extremely cautious again. And the reason for that was twofold. Firstly, local case counts rising quite sharply. So we're in Surrey, we're in a borough of Surrey called Waverley, which includes Cranleigh, Godalming, Hazelmere and Farnham. And the cases went over 100 per 100,000. I've not checked them this morning, but last I checked, they were about 112, 120, I think, per 100,000, which is at the level of what the government are calling a tier 2 lockdown. We're still in tier 1, actually, medium risk here. But the case count was rising quite sharply. And also we were seeing confirmed cases in my children's schools. So 3 children, 3 different schools, 2 at secondary schools, 1 at a primary school. And they had teachers and children in all 3 cases who were going off with positive COVID diagnosis. They were doing tracking and tracing, they were having to self-isolate other students, other pupils at his school. So my nephew, who is 12 years old, was one of those who was contacted because of his potential exposure to one of the teachers with COVID-19 and told to self-isolate for 2 weeks. So he's still going through that self-isolation. So for those reasons, for the rising local case count, and because of the cases in our schools, I was being more cautious. I'd stopped going to the supermarket, just generally sort of going back to what I guess we'd call lockdown measures. And then last Wednesday, I woke up feeling quite grotty, best described I think as having a bit of a fuzzy head. So I felt a bit lightheaded, a bit of a headache, and didn't think too much of it. I hadn't slept very well the night before or the night before that, so I thought it might just be lack of sleep. And it wasn't until last Thursday that I developed a fever, developed a temperature. So Thursday evening, having felt again quite grotty all day with this light fuzzy head feeling, I had a fever, only 38.5, so whilst it was a fever, it wasn't particularly hot. And that prompted me to go online and book myself a coronavirus test. Have to say the testing system this time round, absolutely fantastic. We had to book a test for my wife Becky at the start of September, so she's a teacher. And she came down with a cough shortly after going back to work at the start of September. And the testing system then was awful. It was a case of sitting there for the whole day pressing refresh, trying to find a test. And the nearest test we could find her was actually Aberdeen. So Aberdeen Airport, 500 plus miles away each way. We were able to use the QR code from that test booking to get her into a local test centre, and she was negative back then. This time round, fantastic, online, straight through to a choice of 3 local drive-in test centres, each with hundreds of tests available. So I booked myself a test for the following morning, for Friday morning. Got in the car, was feeling well enough to drive, and also with the Tesla's sort of self-driving capability, the autopilot, felt quite safe doing that as well. Don't have to worry about slower reaction times too much, because if a car in front of me stops, so does your Tesla. So drove myself down to the testing centre, which was run with absolutely military efficiency, probably was being run by the military, in and out in 10 minutes. And it was the second time I've self-administered a test, because I was part of the Imperial College, King's College testing, where they sent you tests at home. So I think I did that 6 or 7 weeks ago, which came back negative. So did the test Friday morning, came home, straight back to bed, still feeling pretty lousy. And the test results came through via a text message and an email when I was waking up on Sunday morning, so within 48 hours, which is a really good turnaround time. And it confirmed that I had coronavirus. And still at that point, I wasn't convinced that it was going to come back positive, because the fever had been quite short-lived, probably about 24 hours, and wasn't that hot, 38.5 centigrade. And whilst I had a bit of a cough, it wasn't what everyone describes as a dry cough. It was quite a productive cough, not to go into the gory details on this one. So a little bit surprised to get the positive test result back, but sort of resigned myself anyway to being in self-isolation for the remainder of the 10 days, and in the case of my family for 14 days. So that's where we're at. I'm filming this on Tuesday morning, out of bed today, feeling a whole world better. I still have an occasional cough, but it's not really there very much. Still have a slight sort of fuzzy head feeling, and very tired indeed as well. So yesterday I managed to do 3 or 4 hours work in the morning, lying in bed with my laptop, and then slept for a lot of the afternoon. I suspect I'll be sleeping again this afternoon after I've done some work this morning. So tiredness is definitely one of the issues with it. But that's my experience. I'm very thankful that it's been a very mild dose of coronavirus. I still don't know for sure where I caught it. And interestingly, that's the question my GP asked. She phoned me last night just out of courtesy because she'd seen my positive test result, checked to see how I was doing, and asked if I knew where I'd got it from. Don't know for sure, possibly via the schools, but who knows. I actually did have a potential exposure notification on my phone about a week before getting symptoms, so the week before I got the fever and the cough and things. And that flashed up on Friday in the NHS app. So the way it works if you're running the track and trace app on your phone is firstly the phone, so Apple or Google, do the background contact tracing work. And if you have a potential exposure, it's Apple or Google's software that tells you about it. And then that's analysed by the NHS app. But interestingly, whilst I had this thing flash up on Friday when I was driving back from a test actually, I didn't see what it said, only that this potential exposure had been analysed. And I don't know what the results of that potential exposure were. There's no way within the app of seeing the results or what's gone on. So I still don't know for sure whether that was the cause of it. Could have been just somebody random I was in contact with, although I can't think of anyone that I've had particularly close contact with in the past fortnight or so. Or as I say, it could have come back via the schools. So possibly one of the children may have been asymptomatic and passed it on that way, or it could have just been surface transmission, who knows. I don't think I'll ever know for sure, where it came from. But the testing system seems to be working very well now. The track and trace system seems to be working very well. I had a text message on Sunday morning with a link to the track and trace website, had to fill in some of my movements for the past week, and then the week before that as well, so they could try and, I guess, track down where it could have come from, contact people that I've been in close contact with. But as of yet, don't know for sure. So that's my experience. I'm only a sample of one. I probably should have sort of started this video. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trained medical professional, so anything I've said or anything I come on to say in a moment about these studies comes from personal experience. It doesn't come from any position of particular insight. There's a few sort of studies that have come across my desk that are related to coronavirus and I wanted to have a quick look at. So the first is Imperial College, London, and they've been doing a lot of antibody testing. And they've discovered that the number of people in the population with antibodies to Covid-19 has fallen by about 26% since the lockdown measures were eased. Now, this raises some quite big concerns about the potential for herd immunity at a population level. Because to get to a herd immunity type situation, you need probably 50 to 60% of the population with antibodies. But they're actually showing, despite rising COVID cases, fewer people have antibodies. That suggests the antibodies for COVID are quite short-lived. So at the end of June, about 6% of the population had antibodies. That fell last month when the second wave started coming along, so only 4.4% of the population. Now, this is a widespread study. It's a very respected study, and it appears to be accurate, and as accurate as it can be with the population sample they've analysed. But we are going in the wrong direction in terms of antibodies, in terms of the potential for herd immunity. And I think that's quite a big concern if that is seen as the way out of COVID-19 for the economy, for society at large, then herd immunity just really doesn't appear to be the answer. And also, if antibodies are quite short-lived, in my own experience, having COVID right now in late October, could mean that by the start of next year, January, February time, I'm just at much risk of getting COVID again and contracting it again. So it's unlikely that I'm going to change my behaviour. I'm going to be any less cautious as a result of having COVID this time round. I suppose the only saving grace from it is knowing I've had it quite mildly, and my body has reacted to it the way it has. It gives me a little bit more confidence than I had before. But I'm still quite going to be very cautious when it comes to this. So that's the first study about antibodies. The second one, I've been looking around on this, so I've seen quite a bit on this on Twitter today, but I haven't actually seen a finalised study, just one that's taking place. And this is about vitamin D. Now, there's been quite a lot of talk about vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin. We don't get much vitamin D here in England, particularly this time of year, anywhere in the northern hemisphere really, at this time of year. But there isn't that much sunshine going on. So I've taken vitamin D supplements for quite some time. I've upped my dosage since the start of the pandemic. There is a study taking place at the moment looking at whether vitamin D can effectively protect people from the worst of COVID-19, but that is very much ongoing. I certainly can't find any conclusions drawn from those studies just yet. Again, my own experiment of one that's taken place here. Since the start of the pandemic, I've been taking vitamin D supplements, some other ones as well, so vitamin C, vitamin B12, also magnesium. And again, this is only based on anecdotal studies, anecdotal reports that suggest those supplements can be quite good in warding it off. There seems to be a correlation between vitamin D deficiency and people who suffer the very worst of COVID-19. Now, of course, correlation is not causation, and we shouldn't draw any conclusions from the fact that people with vitamin D deficiencies tend to suffer more from COVID-19. It could just well be that's a comorbidity, and people who have other serious health issues do tend to have vitamin D deficiencies anyway. But there's no harm in taking the recommended daily dose of D, and for me, for B12, for C, for magnesium. Every morning I have a mushroom coffee. That sounds disgusting, I promise it's not. It's got mushroom extract in it. So the one I have is from a brand called Four Sigmatic, and it has extract of lion's mane and chaga, and those are meant to be immunity boosters. So I have that coffee, I blend some grass-fed butter into it to make it bulletproof. If you've not looked into bulletproof coffee before, do some reading, learn about that. It's a fantastic drink in the morning. And the other thing I do on a daily basis is have a very cold, ice-cold shower every morning. And again, there's some research that suggests that's meant to help to activate your immune system and give you that immunity booster. So again, that's a few of the things I've been doing to keep my immunity up. Now, the other study that's come across my desk today, which I found really interesting, this is tweeted by Tom Whitfale, who is a policy director for Pure Electric, who are an electric bike and electric scooter firm. And Tom's come across a study which found that 6,000 people in the UK could have had their lives saved if we'd had cleaner air. So this is a study that found air pollution is linked to COVID-19 deaths. Around 14% of COVID-19 deaths here in the UK linked to bad air quality, and about 15% worldwide, so slightly fewer as a percentage here in the UK. And this one I found particularly interesting. Again, as somebody who grew up with asthma as a child, air pollution is clearly a factor in breathing difficulties and causes a great many deaths in the UK and worldwide each year, regardless of COVID-19. One of the positives from the pandemic, I think, was our cutting back on our driving, cutting back on air travel, and all of these things helping to clean up air pollution. And it's a real shame, I think, since those lockdown measures have been easing, to see people just falling back into old habits. So jumping on a plane where they can and going on abroad on holiday, getting into the car to do the school run. We live quite near to a school here, and it's just horrible to see the number of parents who sit outside school at school pickup time with the engines running. And I'll often go out there and have a quiet word with them. I can at the moment, I'm isolated in the house, but if I see somebody who's sitting there waiting to pick up a child outside of school with their engine, diesel or petrol engine running, then I'll go and have a word, because it's awful for our children's health. It's awful for all of our health. That air pollution tends to come out of the car and then sits in the classrooms and around the classrooms, so it's really bad news. But hopefully that study, which found that 6,000 deaths in the UK could have been prevented if we'd had better air quality, will just prompt people to think, what am I doing? Why have I made this change back to the old way of doing things, to jump in my car at any opportunity, to book international travel where I can for holidays? We have to find a new way of doing things. We have to walk and cycle more, use electric scooters more, use electric vehicles more. It can't be right that we condemn our children's health in the future because of bad air pollution. So a few thoughts there about my own experience with COVID-19. I'm going to go head back to bed in a minute because I'm feeling exhausted again already. But do leave some comments down below on any of those thoughts, your own experience with COVID-19, vitamin D, Talk about air pollution, please. Talk about all of these studies around the waning herd immunity that seems to be happening in the country at the moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do leave a comment down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I'm able to. I can sit in bed with my iPhone and reply to some comments too. But thank you for watching this video. Do subscribe for more like this. And until next time, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.